A busy hospital corridor. Doctors rush past with clipboards and stethoscopes. Nurses wheel carts. Machines beep softly. The camera pans to Dr. Michael Carter, an accomplished surgeon, reviewing a patient chart with calm authority. Dr. Michael Carter had seen it all. Emergency cases, life or death surgeries, chaotic nights. He thought nothing could surprise him, especially not a young resident who seemed quiet, unassuming, and, frankly, ordinary. A humble resident, Dr. Emma Lawson, quietly adjusting a patient's IV line. She smiles politely at staff and patients, but speaks softly, almost blending into the background. He thought she was just a resident, someone learning the ropes, someone who didn't stand out. But he had no idea the secret she carried, a secret that would change everything he believed about courage, skill, and true strength. A colonel in plain clothes, watching Emma from across the room. His eyes narrow as he leans toward Dr. Carter and whispers something inaudible. Dr. Carter's eyes widen in shock. Sometimes appearances can be deceiving, and in this hospital, a single whisper would shatter everything he thought he knew. The hospital buzzed with the familiar chaos of life and death. The fluorescent lights hummed overhead, illuminating rows of patient beds, shiny floors, reflecting the hurried footsteps of nurses and doctors. The faint sound of beeping monitors blended with the soft murmur of concerned visitors. It was a place of calm routines and sudden emergencies, where every second mattered. Dr. Michael Carter strode down the main corridor, clipboard in hand, his tailored white coat crisp and immaculate. As the hospital's senior surgeon, he carried the authority of experience, the confidence of someone who had faced every conceivable emergency and survived. His piercing eyes scanned each room with a practiced gaze, evaluating, judging, anticipating. Nothing escaped his notice, except perhaps the quiet figure moving silently in the background. That figure was Dr. Emma Lawson, a young resident whose presence seemed almost invisible. Her soft brown hair was neatly tied back, her uniform perfectly pressed. She carried herself with a calm precision, adjusting IV lines, checking vitals, and offering gentle reassurance to patients. To most, she was nothing more than another face in the endless stream of hospital staff, diligent, polite, but unremarkable. Dr. Carter barely glanced at her as he passed. Just another resident learning the ropes, he thought. She'll get there, eventually. Yet, there was something in her movements that caught the eye of a more discerning observer. A colonel in plain clothes, standing near the nurse's station, noticed the slight grace with which she adjusted a patient's oxygen mask, the way her fingers moved with effortless precision, almost as if she knew instinctively what to do before anyone even asked. His lips curved into the faintest hint of a smile, recognition buried deep beneath years of experience. Meanwhile, Emma went about her work silently, her focus unwavering. She didn't notice the colonel's gaze, nor did she seek acknowledgement from anyone. Her life had taught her that quiet competence often went unseen, that true skill was measured not by applause, but by results. And in the back of her mind, memories of a different life flickered, a life where hesitation could mean death, where one mistake was unforgivable. The hospital corridors continued their symphony of urgency. Nurses wheeled carts filled with medications, monitors beeped erratically, and patients murmured in discomfort. In the midst of all this, a code blue alarm blared suddenly from the ICU. Dr. Carter straightened immediately, his eyes narrowing. Code blue, room 312. The intercom crackled. He sprinted toward the ICU with practiced efficiency, expecting to see chaos. But when he arrived, he noticed Emma already there. She had calmly assessed the patient, adjusted the ventilator, and begun administering critical care. Every movement deliberate, every decision precise. Dr. Carter's initial thought was surprise. How does a resident move like this? He stepped forward, ready to take control, but something in her posture made him pause. She wasn't panicked. She wasn't unsure. She was in command, yet quietly. Every action she took seemed instinctual, almost preternatural. From the corner of the room, the colonel observed silently, arms folded. He leaned toward a nurse, standing beside him, and whispered, just loud enough for her to hear, "You have no idea who she really is." The words hung in the air, heavy with implication. Dr. Carter glanced at the colonel, confused, and then back at Emma, whose calm demeanor belied the extraordinary skill she was demonstrating. For the first time that day, the surgeon felt a flicker of doubt and curiosity. The hospital, a place of routine and predictability, had suddenly become a stage for something far greater. A quiet, unassuming resident had stepped into the spotlight without knowing it, and the whisper of a colonel hinted that there was far more to her story than anyone could imagine. And in that moment, Dr. Michael Carter realized he might have underestimated her completely. The morning sun filtered through the tall hospital windows, casting long shadows across the polished floors. The scent of antiseptic mingled with the faint aroma of coffee from the staff lounge. Life in the hospital seemed ordinary to most, a predictable rhythm of checkups, charts, and cautious conversations. But beneath the surface, tension was slowly building, like the quiet hum before a storm. Dr. Michael Carter had barely recovered from his initial surprise at seeing Emma's skill during the code blue. He returned to his rounds, but his mind lingered on her. Every patient she interacted with seemed to benefit from her uncanny foresight. She anticipated medication needs, corrected subtle errors in charting before anyone noticed, and managed panicked patients with a calm authority that seemed almost unnatural for a resident. "How is she this precise?" Carter muttered under his breath as he observed her adjust a patient's IV line. She moved like someone who had done this 1,000 times, and yet she was only a resident. Meanwhile, in the corner of the nurses' station, Colonel Harris watched Emma intently. His posture was rigid, eyes narrowing with recognition. Every action she took was a confirmation of what he had known long before. She was not just a doctor in training. She had been trained for high-stakes situations where hesitation was a luxury and lives depended on split-second decisions. The first small clue came during a routine emergency in the pediatric wing. A young boy began to seize unexpectedly. Nurses scrambled, and Dr. Carter instinctively moved to take control. But Emma was already there. Her hands moved with incredible precision, adjusting the boy's oxygen mask, stabilizing his airway, monitoring vitals with the subtle efficiency of someone who had seen life and death countless times. She directed the nurses with gentle authority, each instruction clear and decisive, yet never loud or demanding. Carter stood back, stunned. "She's handling this better than I am," he thought, heart pounding with a mix of awe and unease. Later, a patient in the ICU began showing signs of cardiac distress. Emma immediately recognized the anomaly in the readings, calling for a rare intervention before the alarms even fully sounded. She executed the procedure flawlessly, a delicate maneuver that Dr. Carter himself had never performed outside specialized surgery. This time, he couldn't hide his surprise. He leaned against the wall, watching her work. How could someone so young, so quiet, know this? Even the nurses whispered to each other in astonishment. "Is she trained for something else? I've never seen a resident move like that." Colonel Harris, standing in the shadow of the ICU doorway, didn't whisper to anyone. He only watched, expression unreadable, a flicker of pride and nostalgia crossing his face. Later, during a brief break in the chaos, Carter approached Emma, intending to speak to her about her exceptional performance. She smiled politely, brushing a loose strand of hair behind her ear. "Dr. Carter, is there something you need?" she asked softly, her tone calm, almost rehearsed. He hesitated, choosing his words carefully. "Emma, that procedure earlier, you handled it with the precision of a senior surgeon. You anticipated every complication before it arose. That's extraordinary for someone in your position." Emma's smile didn't falter, but there was a faint shadow in her eyes. "Thank you, sir. I've been trained to observe and respond, that's all." Her words were simple, almost humble, but Dr. Carter sensed there was far more behind them. As the day wore on, Emma continued to demonstrate subtle, almost imperceptible skills that drew more attention. She corrected a misread scan before anyone else noticed, calmed a panicked patient in a matter of seconds, and organized chaotic emergency procedures with quiet efficiency. Each action was a puzzle piece, slowly revealing a picture that Dr. Carter couldn't yet comprehend. Something in her history, something in her training, had prepared her for situations far beyond what a normal resident would face. By the end of the day, Carter found himself standing in the hospital corridor, staring after Emma as she walked away, deep in thought. The colonel's words from earlier that morning echoed in his mind. "You have no idea who she really is." And for the first time in his career, Dr. Michael Carter realized that this quiet, unassuming resident might be someone entirely extraordinary, someone whose story had yet to be fully revealed. The hospital, which had seemed routine, now felt charged with unseen tension. Every glance at Emma carried the question, who is she really? And somewhere in the shadows, Colonel Harris knew the answer. The hospital's emergency wing was unusually quiet now. The flurry of morning chaos had passed, replaced by a tense anticipation. Dr. Carter, still processing the astonishing skill Emma had displayed earlier, walked toward the staff lounge to get a moment of clarity. His mind kept returning to her precise movements, calm demeanor, and almost supernatural anticipation of critical events. As he rounded the corner, he noticed Colonel Harris leaning casually against the wall near the lounge entrance. The colonel's presence alone commanded attention, a calm authority, tempered with a quiet intensity. His eyes followed Emma as she walked by, clipboard in hand, moving with unassuming grace. Dr. Carter approached him hesitantly. "Colonel, can I ask you something?" Harris turned slightly, his piercing gaze assessing him. "About her?" he asked softly, already knowing where this conversation was headed. Carter nodded, the weight of curiosity pressing against him. "Yes. How is it that she handles situations like that? She's a resident, yet she moved with precision, faster, more confident than most of our senior surgeons." The colonel's lips curved into a faint smile, though his eyes remained serious. He leaned closer, lowering his voice almost to a whisper. "You have no idea who she really is." Carter's eyes widened. "What do you mean?" he asked, a mixture of confusion and intrigue threading his voice. Harris glanced briefly at Emma, who was tending to a patient across the hall, completely unaware of the conversation. "Dr. Lawson," he said finally, "was trained long before she arrived at this hospital. She's not just a resident, she's a Special Forces medical officer, highly decorated, trained for emergency surgeries in war zones, hostile environments, and life-or-death situations that most people can't even imagine." Carter felt a shiver run down his spine. "Special Forces," he echoed incredulously. "But she's a civilian here, a resident. How is that possible?" Harris's expression softened, a mix of pride and quiet sadness touching his features. She chose to step away from that world. After years of service, after seeing more death and chaos than most will in a lifetime, she wanted peace. She wanted a normal life, a place where her skills could help people quietly, without recognition. That's why she became a resident. That's why she blends in, because she wanted to be unseen. Carter ran a hand over his face, trying to process it. The calm, unassuming young woman he had dismissed as ordinary had once faced horrors and pressures beyond his imagination. Yet here she was, walking among them, humble and quiet. "All this time, and I never suspected a thing," Carter murmured. Harris nodded, a shadow crossing his face. That's how she wants it. Most people would be intimidated, even in awe. But she doesn't seek attention. She acts because it is necessary. She saves lives because she can, and she does it silently. Carter's mind flashed back to every incident that morning, every flawless intervention, every calm, decisive movement. Suddenly, everything made sense. Emma wasn't lucky. She wasn't just talented. She was trained to operate under pressure where failure meant death, not just inconvenience. Harris's voice softened further, almost reverent. And that, Dr. Carter, is why you must never underestimate her. She may appear ordinary, but her skill and courage surpass anything you've seen in this hospital, or any hospital. At that moment, Carter realized the truth. He had misjudged her entirely. The woman he had thought was quiet, polite, and ordinary was someone extraordinary. And the whisper of a colonel had just pulled back the curtain on a hidden life of discipline, danger, and heroism. He turned to look at Emma, who now adjusted the medication for another patient. She worked quietly, entirely unaware of the revelation that had just unfolded behind her back. Her movements were precise, her expression calm, her presence commanding respect without demanding it. Carter swallowed hard. I had no idea, he murmured, more to himself than to Harris. Harris gave a subtle nod. Most people don't, and that's exactly how she wants it. For the first time, Dr. Michael Carter saw her clearly, not as a resident in training, not as a quiet face in the hospital, but as someone extraordinary, whose presence alone could change lives and save countless others. And in that realization, the hospital's routine rhythm seemed different. The hallways, the machines, the constant hum of activity. Everything now carried a new tension, a sense that anything could happen around her, and she would be ready. The stage was set. The unassuming resident was about to reveal more than anyone could have imagined, and Dr. Carter knew, deep down, that nothing in the hospital, not protocols, not hierarchy, not his own experience, would ever look the same again. The hospital had never been quieter. The usual hum of machinery and the soft shuffle of nurses' footsteps seemed distant, almost muted, as though the world had slowed to a single, intense heartbeat. An emergency call had come in. A multi-car accident on the highway, leaving several patients in critical condition. The hospital mobilized instantly, corridors flooded with gurneys, monitors, and frantic staff. Adrenaline surged through the air, tension thick enough to taste. Dr. Carter was directing the chaos, barking orders with authority and precision. Yet, even in this maelstrom, his eyes kept flicking to Emma. She moved like a force of nature, calm, deliberate, impossibly focused. Her hands worked swiftly, checking vitals, stabilizing patients, and guiding less experienced staff. Every decision she made was instantaneous, precise, and life-saving. "Emma, the patient in 312, oxygen's dropping," a nurse shouted. Without hesitation, she ran to the room, assessing the patient in seconds. She adjusted the ventilator, administered the correct medications, and coordinated with the trauma team, all in a seamless rhythm. Dr. Carter watched in awe, realizing the magnitude of what he had underestimated. Every patient she touched seemed to stabilize under her care, and when a patient began hemorrhaging, she moved faster than anyone else, performing a critical procedure she had mastered in the field. A procedure that most surgeons in the hospital had never performed outside textbooks. "She's incredible," Carter whispered to himself, his voice trembling with admiration. In the midst of the chaos, Colonel Harris appeared, quietly observing from the corridor. His sharp eyes softened slightly as he watched Emma. He knew this was exactly what she had been trained for. High-stakes emergencies where every second could mean life or death. "She's extraordinary," he murmured. As the night wore on, Emma's skill became undeniable. A young boy with multiple fractures screamed in pain. She held his hand, calming him, checking his vitals, administering analgesics with a gentle touch. A woman in the ICU clutched her chest on the verge of collapse. Emma's quick intervention stabilized her before the monitors even had a chance to alarm. Carter realized he was witnessing not just skill, but heroism in its purest form. This young resident, whom he had dismissed hours earlier, was saving lives with a precision, courage, and composure that transcended any standard medical training. After several grueling hours, the emergency was finally under control. Patients were stabilized, families comforted, and the adrenaline slowly faded. The hospital corridors, once chaotic, returned to their normal rhythm, but the impression Emma had left on everyone was indelible. Dr. Carter approached her, his usual confidence replaced with genuine respect and awe. "Emma," he said softly, I have to apologize. I misjudged you. You're not just a resident. You're something else entirely." Emma smiled faintly, her expression calm, almost serene. "Thank you, Dr. Carter. I did what was necessary, that's all." Carter shook his head, still struggling to find words. "No, it's more than that. You saved lives tonight that no one else could have. You handled pressure I've only seen in rare cases in combat or disaster training. You were extraordinary." The colonel stepped forward, his voice firm but quiet. "And that's exactly why I brought you here, Michael. She's exceptional, but she chooses where she serves, quietly, without fanfare. You've just witnessed her in her element." Emma's humility contrasted sharply with the magnitude of her actions. She didn't seek recognition, she didn't expect applause. And yet, in her quiet competence, she had commanded the respect and awe of everyone who had witnessed her brilliance. The staff began to gather, whispering in astonishment. Even the most experienced nurses and doctors exchanged glances, marveling at her composure under pressure. She had not only saved lives, she had transformed the perception of what a single person could achieve in the face of overwhelming odds. Dr. Carter finally looked at her with unshakable respect. "I've never seen anything like that. You're remarkable." Emma's eyes softened. "I only do what's necessary. That's all any of us can do." In that moment, the hospital seemed to pause, as if acknowledging her truth. The unassuming resident had revealed herself fully. Not through words, but through actions that spoke louder than anything anyone could say. Colonel Harris watched quietly from the corridor, a subtle nod acknowledging the perfection of her execution. "This is exactly who she is," he murmured. Dr. Carter, once confident in his own authority, now stood humbled. He realized that heroism was not measured by titles, experience, or status, but by courage, skill, and the willingness to act when it mattered most. And Emma, silent and composed, had just redefined what it meant to be extraordinary. Months had passed since that fateful day when the hospital had been thrown into chaos. Yet the memory of Emma Lawson's extraordinary skill lingered in every corridor, every whispered conversation, and every glance from colleagues who had once underestimated her. She had returned to her quiet routine, tending to patients, mentoring younger residents, and moving through the hospital with the same calm humility that had always defined her. But now, no one could ignore her presence. The hospital board had arranged a small, private ceremony to honor Emma, not because she sought recognition, she never had, but because her actions had transcended ordinary duty. Patients she had saved were now recovering, and staff who had witnessed her expertise had insisted on acknowledging her. Dr. Carter, now a close ally and advocate, stood at the front of the room. His voice carried a mix of respect, pride, and awe. "Emma Lawson is more than a resident. She is an example of courage, humility, and excellence. What she demonstrated in those critical moments was nothing short of extraordinary." Emma, standing quietly at the side, felt a warmth in her chest. She had never sought praise, yet she realized that sometimes recognition was not about ego. It was about inspiring others to believe in courage and quiet strength. Colonel Harris, seated in the front row, gave her a subtle nod. His eyes carried the weight of experience, of battles fought in life and death scenarios, and now a profound respect for the civilian life she had chosen to embrace. "I knew her potential," he whispered to Carter, "but even I am amazed at how she chooses to use it." As Emma returned to her rounds, Dr. Carter walked beside her. "I have to ask," he said, his voice quieter now. "Why? Why step away from everything you trained for? Why choose a life that seems ordinary?" Emma smiled softly, glancing at the patients around them. "Because even extraordinary skill can be used quietly. Because every life I save here matters just as much as one in a war zone. I wanted a life where I could make a difference without needing recognition or medals." Carter nodded, understanding more than he could express. For the first time, he realized that true greatness does not demand an audience. It exists in the quiet acts of courage and compassion that go unseen. Emma's story began to spread through the hospital, whispered first among staff, then shared with new recruits and interns. Her calm bravery inspired a culture of respect, diligence, and humility. She had shown that even the most unassuming individuals could perform extraordinary acts when the moment demanded it. The colonel's presence, though rarely acknowledged, became a reminder that discipline, training, and courage could be carried into civilian life to quietly change the world. One evening, as Emma walked through the hospital's empty corridors, she paused by a window overlooking the city. Lights twinkled in the distance, cars rushing along streets, lives moving in constant motion. She realized that every patient she touched, every life she influenced, was part of a greater legacy, one built not on recognition, but on quiet, persistent courage. We often look for heroes in extraordinary places, expecting them to wear uniforms, carry titles, or seek the spotlight. But sometimes the greatest heroes are those who work quietly, unseen, and act with courage when it matters most. Emma Lawson reminds us that true strength is not measured by accolades, but by action, humility, and the lives we touch in silence. Never underestimate those who appear ordinary, because they may be extraordinary when the world needs them most. Visual. Emma walking down a quiet corridor, the soft glow of the hospital lights reflecting off her stethoscope. Patients and staff pause briefly to nod in quiet admiration, but she barely notices, focused entirely on her next task. Background. A panoramic city skyline seen through large windows, hinting at the countless lives she impacts beyond the hospital walls. Text overlay. Appearances can be deceiving. True heroes hide in plain sight. This closing section reinforces the moral and life lesson of the story, provides emotional closure and lasting impact for viewers, highlights Emma's humility, courage, and quiet heroism, inspiring the audience, creates perfect pacing for a YouTube storytelling video, leaving viewers reflective and engaged.